unless Thank you. Please keep yourself muted unless you're speaking during the Q&A portion of the agenda. We have disabled the feature where you can unmute yourself and turn on your camera. So unless you have a muted version of Zoom and you can somehow unmute yourself, please just stay muted. This is just to give our speakers the opportunity to get through what they have to say. If you have any questions as they are speaking, please do jot them down. As I say, we'll have a particular portion in the agenda where you can come off mute and turn on your camera if you so desire to ask your questions. When we do get to the question and answer portion of the agenda, please just indicate that you have a question by raising your hand virtually or typing it in the chat. Cool. That's everything from a housekeeping perspective. Next slide, please. About Wenite. So some of you may know about Wenite. For others, this may be your first time coming across Wenite. Wenite is a UK-based nonprofit edtech platform, and our mission is to empower the next generation of talent in science, technology, engineering, and maths, particularly within life sciences and pharma. And the how of how we do that is essentially by sessions like today. So running practical, really pragmatic sessions like webinars. We also hold in-person events. I guess the star of the show with Wenite is that we also have academy programs for grads and professionals that run annually. And we have our community platform, which we'll speak more about later, but we have a exclusive WhatsApp community called the They Don't Teach This Club, which is also part of our offering. And everything is free to join besides our academy, but we'll speak about that later. So it's meant to be a low barrier of entry access point to anyone thinking about joining the industry. Also, Wenite is 7 years old. I was told this right before the webinar, so I shouldn't have forgotten. Wenite is 7 years old, and it was founded by Jennifer Dominic, who's on the call today. Jennifer, I don't know if you can take yourself off mute to say hello. Sorry, I kind of put you on the spot, but
Goodness, you have put me on the spot behind the scenes. But hi, everyone. It's so lovely to see you all here today. And it's always a privilege and gets me pretty emotional when I see how the vision that the team has put together starts to come to life. And my one thing is that I hope you all take something away that's actionable today, learning from real people in the jobs. Thanks so much, Lara.
Thank you, Jennifer. Remember that face. Jennifer's gonna be famous in this space. Cool. We have 3 exceptional speakers on the call. Chibi Ebigaye, Demi Debo-Alor, and Mavis Dwell. Demi, can you start us off with some introductions, please? Can you come off mute? Okay. Technical difficulties. We'll sort it out. There you go. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Trying to get off mute. Hi, everyone. Lovely to be part of this panel today. So just to introduce myself. So my name is Demi. I am a manager working at a business consulting firm called Baringa. I work within our pharma and life sciences practice. I've been working in life sciences consulting for around a decade now, so essentially a career consultant. So I've been at Baringa for just 18 months now, but prior to working at Baringa, I worked at EY in their business consulting practice for 3 years. And then I worked at another mid-sized consulting firm called Navigant, which is now known as Guidehouse, again in their life sciences, commercial strategy, regulatory and compliance practice. And prior to entering into consulting, I studied neuroscience at the King's College London, and then I studied my master's at University of Cambridge with a course called Bioscience Enterprise.
Fantastic. Thank you, Demi. Chibi, could you also introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Chibi Ebigaye. I studied biochemistry and chemistry dual honours at Keele University. My career spans, I would say, about coming up to 12 years, I believe now. Yes, and my career began in clinical research operations, so working in big pharma, and then since then I worked in across CROs and clinical trial technology providers before I transitioned into management consulting. So I've since worked at Royal Chemistry and then ZS Associates, which is kind of a rather large management consulting firm that specializes in life sciences, where I led a lot of R&D consulting engagements with the top 20 pharma. And now I'm Senior Director of Customer Strategy at a company called Faro, which is basically helping to shape solutions that transform research and development primarily through AI. And what makes my journey, I guess, slightly different, and we'll talk about this more in the session, is that I didn't necessarily start as a career consultant. I used my domain expertise in clinical development to enter consulting. So that brings kind of a slightly different expertise on bridging the two things. But lovely to meet you all, and looking forward to today's discussion.
Thank you, Chibi. And last but not least, Mavis.
Thanks, Laura. So hi, everybody. I'm really, really happy to be here today. And thank you so much to Jennifer and Laura for inviting me. So I'm currently a director in people consulting at BDO, which is a professional services firm. And I'll explain a bit more later on what people consulting actually is. But I'm also a practicing psychotherapist, which has been invaluable for my consulting career. So my journey really started in healthcare. So I started in a leadership role in the NHS as part of my psychotherapy training. I then moved into academia into a leadership role. And then I've been in consulting for the last 8 years, 7 of whom have been with EY, and the last has been really with BDO, where I currently am. And my first degree was in sociology and history. I studied at Leeds. Then I went on to complete further studies, postgraduate qualifications in education and psychotherapy. And I think, I've had such a varied career, but I think one of the things that has been consistent across all of those is that I've just loved working in a way that had real world impact on people's lives. So that's just a little bit about me.
Fantastic. So as you can hear, we've got an exceptional lineup of a wealth of experience in life science consulting and even outside of life science consulting. So fantastic. So let's go straight into the discussion. So starting off strong, Demi, I'll aim this question at you. What is life science consulting?
It's a really good question. I think life sciences consulting is it's really broad. So essentially, in a nutshell, at least the way I describe and explain to people what life sciences consulting is and what I do, it's really helping companies within the life sciences sector. So pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, digital health, tech companies that are developing solutions to support healthcare providers, really helping them to address any of their problems or their challenges that they may be facing. And so with my experience with life sciences consulting, I've really supported clients across the entire value chain. So starting from research and development all the way through to commercial strategy and launch. And the types of projects can be super varied. So some of the engagements that I've supported clients and can vary from helping them with their go-to-market strategy, helping them to identify, for example, if they've got an asset or a therapeutic, which indications to launch their therapeutic in, or which markets to launch in. Also, I've supported clients with ethics and compliance as well. So, for example, helping them to draft and implement policies and procedures around interaction with healthcare professionals, and then projects such as helping clients to even get regulatory approval. So I've done a lot of work supporting companies to draft their technical documentation, and supporting them with going through the process of interacting with the regulators and getting regulatory approval. So I would say life science consulting is very, very broad. And I think that's kind of one of the exciting aspects about it as well, is the amount of variety that you can do when you're in this area, really kind of supporting across the entire value chain, supporting various different functions to really kind of achieve their goals.
Fantastic. And I can definitely vouch for that. Having worked in life science consulting myself, every one project differs from the last project. Like there are no projects that are the same. So you've kind of answered my second question there, which was what are the projects like? But I guess let's go a little bit more granular. And could you explain, Demi, sticking with you, what a day-to-day in the life of a life science consultant might actually look like?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Laura. So I love this question because my answer is always there is no typical day to day, or at least for me, there's no typical day to day. I think it can really vary depending on the project that you're working on, or even potentially if you're actually not on a project. So with consulting, you'll have periods of times where you might not be working directly on a project. And so the kind of the typical industry terminology is that you're on the bench. And so even when you're on the bench, you still have activities and work that you'll be getting involved with internally. So I'd say, you know, some of the activities that I can be involved with when I'm on a project, for example, could be you know, regularly interacting with the client, so having regular meetings with the client. Depending on the type of project, say if it's a, you know, a research project, then that could involve me doing primary research or talking to customers, so healthcare professionals, engaging with patients. If it's more of kind of you know, a technical project or a process development project, it could be including conducting or facilitating workshops with the clients, creating those documentations, creating PowerPoints. So type of work really varies. And then you can also have the business development aspect of the role as well. So that's really kind of helping your organization to, you know, win more work and win more business. And so with that, you could be involved in developing proposals for clients, supporting with actually pitching the work to the clients. So, you know, going to the client, trying to sell them the work, trying to help them to shape how you would help address their problems. So it's a long answer, but the short answer of it is I don't think there is a typical day. There's so many different activities and, you know, different things that you could do on a day-to-day basis.
Fantastic. You mentioned something there that's quite consulting niche, should I say, and it's being on the bench. And there's someone that's only very recently come off the bench at my current workplace. Could you explain a little bit more about what being on the bench actually means and what that involves and what that entails?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm actually on the bench right now. So I just wrapped up my project that I was working on for the past 18 months at the beginning of August. And so as I mentioned, so being on the bench is essentially when you're not directly working on a client engagement. And so I guess one of the kind of the key metrics or the key kind of expectations in consulting is that, you know, you'll be working on client engagement. And so like kind of each of the hours that you spend, you bill it to clients. But when you're not on engagement, there's still a lot of internal work that you can do to support your team or to support your organization. And so that's what we call it, like typically being on the bench. And, you know, another phrase that they can use is doing like side of desk work. So some of the work that I'm currently doing now as I'm on the bench includes kind of developing training materials for my team. So I'm currently developing a training deck which will deliver to help to upskill the team more around market approvals, brand launch and launch excellence. We also do like proposals as well, so helping to create the proposals. So typically you might get a client that may have a problem or a challenge that they need to solve. And so they'll put out what is called an RFP, so a request for proposal. They'll send that out to various suppliers, essentially asking if the suppliers can provide their approach, their methodology, and how they would help the client to address that problem. So typically you might get involved in, you know, drafting that proposal or supporting with a response to the RFP. My company as well, we're trying to do a lot of thought leadership and marketing activities. So that's another aspect that you may get involved with if you're on the bench. So helping to draft any kind of articles, thought leadership, any content that really helps like yourself or your organization to really kind of show their eminence and their expertise and technical knowledge within the specific area that they're consulting or they provide services in. So that's just a couple of examples of the kind of activities that you can get involved with when you're on the bench, but it can be really broad and really varied just depending on the needs of your organization and your team.
Exactly. I think another point to add there is that I typically like to spend my bench time also doing some learning and development. So that's the time where, like, the best time, I'd say, like the golden time, where you want to harness it and really lock in and focus on one of your development goals or a couple of them and start some courses or any training materials you mentioned, Demi. And I think another myth about bench time is that it's downtime, which it tends to be downtime, but you can be on the bench and just as busy. or if not more busy on the bench than you are on
Honestly,
the project. So
that's me right now.
yeah, it can be a lot. Speaking of myths about consulting, Chibi, I'll come over to you. Like, are there any myths that you want to debunk for someone that is perhaps new to life sciences consulting or has preconceived notions about sciences consulting? Yeah, are there any myths that you would debunk? I have one, but I'll let you start.
So I think one of the myths is that a lot of people feel like you can't become an expert at anything because you are uh, a jack of all trades. But I think that the really cool thing about consulting is that it's a ground or an environment where if you have a natural kind of like entrepreneurial spirit or entrepreneurial background to you, which a lot of people think means going off and starting your own company, but consulting is actually a brilliant environment for people with that mindset. And because you're constantly experimenting, constantly solving problems and trying out new ideas, you actually have an environment to become a deep expert in some particular areas. So if that's real world evidence, if it's technology, if it's insights and analytics, if you want to become an expert in BD and launch, you can become that. And then you actually have the environment to build solutions and concepts within consulting projects or while you're on the bench that later can grow into formal revenue generating offerings. And I think that's one of the really cool things about consulting, the fact that if you bring that like natural entrepreneurial mindset and spirit to it, you can actually become an expert or a specialist in any area that you like.
100% agree. And you stole the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say that a common myth I find is that consultants are generalists, which
Yes.
yes, they can be. Yes, most people know a lot about a lot of things, but you can be very, very deeply knowledgeable about very niche topics. Ask me anything about nasogastric tubes in pediatric patients in Japan, and I probably know the answer because I've done a project in that. Moving on to more onto like the types of clients, Mavis, a question for you. Who would you say are the main types of clients in this space? And I think clients is consultants speech or speak. So could you also kind of break down what a client is in this space?
Yeah, so a client is so it's basically what Demi mentioned earlier, is different types of companies. And for me, it's both in the life sciences and the healthcare. So life sciences, that's where the innovation, the creation of the products are made. And healthcare is really about bringing it to life and having that real world impact. So with the life sciences, as you mentioned, you've got the massive pharmaceuticals, but then you've got the smaller startups and biotechs. So there's something about in the life sciences knowing that you're working with companies that are at different stages of a journey of growth. So some are just starting, they've just got some initial funding, doing some initial research. Some have actually created a case for change and they're starting to grow. And then they're getting more venture capitalists investment, and then some are getting bigger and actually becoming to scale and therefore getting some private investment as well. So we work with people across that whole journey because they have different needs, particularly from a people perspective at different points in time. When it comes to healthcare, you've got healthcare in the perspective of NHS public services in that respect, which we all know and familiar with, your GP surgeries, your hospitals, your commissioning groups. But then you've also got private providers, famous ones like your Boopers, for example, private dentists, etc. So it really covers a massive sector with lots of different segments in it. So I can work with any client at different stages.
Have you found there to be major differences in the types of people that these companies want or these clients want to work for them um, based on their different types?
No, I don't think they're different types. There may be different kinds of capabilities and skills that they may require. So there may be some technical knowledge and experience that certain companies may require at different stages. So if you're a startup, you may require somebody with deep technical life science background and knowledge because you're actually trying to develop and test and research that you've actually got an innovation that's going to actually be successful. But then as they start to scale and grow, they need to have more of a commercial headset. So they're going to need people in their business who are able to actually understand the numbers, understand how to procure and develop. You talked about supply chain, how to get that product to market. But also, what they're going to need is their technical specialists, so those people who've got deep life science backgrounds, who are in leadership roles, to develop more of their soft skills. So often, what could be hardest challenge is people pivoting from a technical skill set to leading people. Because leading people is about building relationships. It's not creating a service or product as such, it's building relationships. And to build relationships, you need to understand people, you need to care about people, you need to build trust with people. And I think particularly in the life sciences sector, why that's so important is when you're innovating, it's about taking risks. Sometimes you can get it wrong. In order for people to feel safe to innovate, they need to feel that it's safe to take risks. They're supported in doing so, and there's not going to be retribution. So, getting the right leaders who can create that psychological safety is a really key part in enabling those businesses to grow.
Amazing. Thank you, Mavis. And just to piggyback off that, either Chibi or Demi, as people who have quite senior experience or have managed people in the past, how would you, or I guess, what does a project team tend to look like, and how would you manage a project team on a day-to-day basis?
Okay. I mean, I can take a pass at that. So the interesting thing about a lot of consulting firms is that they're highly matrixed. So you are working with people who are working with a lot, maybe on other projects, maybe they're 50% on your project, 50% on another project. So even just to get started, you need to understand from the people that you're going to be working with on your team, like how much time can you give to this, and how much time do you have available? Because you want somebody who can give you their very best, but also you're not sacrificing what they can do on whatever project they're working on with another manager. So when I was, and I'm going to speak more to my experience at Real Chemistry and ZS, but one of the things that I would do there is you kind of coordinate with their other manager at first, or their staffing person. So, how much time do they have? What kind of skills also are you looking for that they can bring to the project? What different levels on the project do you need? Do you need somebody who's going to be focused on knowledge management and insights? Do you need someone that's going to help with facilitating workshops? You think about all of these different things that you need, and then you think about how much time can they bring to the project? How much time can they fully engage? And then also, and this is another thing you'd be thinking about leading, like, how's it going to affect my margins? So if I have too many people on my project, am I going to then have like very little margin, so we're not making enough money from it? Or am I going to have, maybe I'm not delivering effectively for the client altogether? So once you have all of that, like that's even before they start working on the project. This is all the stuff you have to think about beforehand. And then once you have all of that, you get your team on, and then you start thinking about like how's everyone going to work day to day. So in the kind of more senior role that I was in, I almost would have like a right hand. So that person is overseeing as a consultant all the other team members. They're checking in to make sure that everybody is delivering pieces of work. They're doing end of day updates, maybe if it's a longer engagement, end of week updates, and I can see exactly what everybody's doing. They are managing their different work streams. What we would maybe do is like with the LT level of my project, we would meet maybe on a daily basis, and we would check in and say, these are the things that we need to do. These are the meetings we're going to go to. Can I see what you've done? And then the other thing that was very important in leading in that area is that you have to do a lot of review. So coming in externally into consulting, one of the biggest things we learned was that like whatever you put in front of a client has to be absolutely crisp, no mistakes, and no room for error. So that really means that you are training up a team that thinks in that way. And I think when I first started, I think an anecdote about me was that I would be I'm somebody that would jump in with teams. So I would be like, okay, that's not quite right. And I would edit things myself. But over time, I evolved to be like, this is not my expectation. And making sure that people then work towards whatever my expectation is, and then deliver much better work, going through reviewing people, giving them feedback about why it could be better, why it was good. And so that's probably the complexity of working and managing a team throughout a project. What the last thing I'll say is that consulting can be a lot of work. You've heard from Demi and Mavis about like all the things that are involved. So another important thing about consulting managers is also looking after the well-being of your team, because some people can get very, very bogged down, scurried away, doing all the things that need to be done, and not coming up for air. So as well as making sure that your project is delivered to a high standard, you are checking in to make sure that people like working with you. That's very important in consulting. They're enjoying their project. They feel like they are doing a good job, but they also, that they're not overworked as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chibi. You mentioned something there about people perhaps working 50% on another project. And one thing that we joke about at my current workplace is that if you're 50% staffed on one project and 50% staffed on another project, you're at 200% capacity. You're working on both of them at
You're doing
100%.
two jobs.
You're essentially. And the comment you made about high quality work at a previous workplace I worked at, we used to have this saying that was 0 defect slides, which is high pressure. Like, it's a lot of pressure to put on any one person or even a team to make something perfect. Nothing is ever perfect. The more experience you gain, you'll realize that you can kind of, attain that level of quality. Like, I know people that can spot the difference in spacing of bullet points by the eye. Like, to an untrained eye, you cannot tell the difference. But to some consultants that have years of experience, these things flag to them just as like instantly.
Yeah.
Maybe on the people point, consulting can be a lot of pressure. You're working towards sometimes really tight deadlines, various personalities on a project. Some projects can be large, some projects can be smaller teams. How would you, from a people perspective, kind of advise people approach working with various people, even leadership style? And if you're not a leader and perhaps you're more junior in your role, what tips would you give people working in consulting, life sciences consulting?
Yeah, I think this is such an important conversation around high performance and what does that actually mean. And I think if you look at it from the perspective of the leader piece, first of all, because we are in positional power, our job is to create, as I said, that environmental psychological safety so that people can learn and grow. And what that means is people not being afraid to make mistakes, but being able to use that as opportunities to learn and keep getting better. So it's how to create that kind of coaching style of leadership where it becomes okay to learn, but also okay to thrive. And how do you still set those expectations, but also provide people the resources to be able to meet those as well. So there is a very important role leaders play in being able to set that. Not all leaders are able to do that because it requires a lot of self-awareness sometimes to be able to get there, which is why I work with leaders. But so what does that mean for you who's reporting into somebody? I think one of the key things is really about understanding who you work with. And one of the ways that you can do that, and I think is really important skill, I think, in consulting, is being able to have conversations. And one of those conversations that we always have whenever I start a project is expectations conversations. What are the expectations and how might we work together? And so there is something about, as somebody reporting in, being able to proactively have a conversation to understand what is expected of you and use as an opportunity to discuss and identify and negotiate what might be feasible and doable. That way, everybody is aligned on what is expected. I think the other part about that as well is it requires each of us individually to have a bit of confidence to express what we need. And sometimes the way that we do that is if we've got a leader that we can talk to, we express it through that. Or we need to build a community around us at work with whom we can test ideas with, explore the best way to approach things, and they can support us in identifying a way forward. But I think the key thing is about being able to be aware around your well-being, being able to get the right people around you in order to get advice about how to manage that, and having a very transparent and open conversation with the person you're working with about what they need, how best it can be delivered, and what might be some of the constraints around that. Everything's negotiable, but it takes some confidence to be able to do that and some support.
I think that's fantastic advice. And I think that's advice that can be even more broadly than life sciences consulting, setting expectations, ways of working, even as a direct report through to your manager. It doesn't need to come from your manager to you. Let's look at it.
I was just going to piggyback off the back of that, because I thought was really, important to highlight as well, is that the importance of kind of setting those boundaries, not just with your team, but also with your client.
Yes.
I heard, somebody say that a lot of consultants are basically like overachieving people pleasers. then I think it's very true at some aspects. And you can have situations where, you know, your client might ask, okay, can I have this done within, you know, 24 hours? And the natural instinct is to say yes. And sometimes that burnout is real, and you know, it's not pleasant at all. And sometimes you really, like, it's scary, but you do have to just take a step back and just really kind of set the boundaries with your client and say, does this really need to be done within 24 hours? Or, you know, can I have a little bit extra time to do it, so I can actually do it to a higher standard quality, reduce the amount of rework that needs to be done, and, you know, you get the best result, I get the best result, and we're doing that within, you know, an environment that isn't causing, you know, undue stress, you know, isn't causing, you know, unnecessary pressure. So I think it is so important in consulting to really kind of have that confidence, as you said, maybe to set boundaries, not just with your team, but with your client as well.
Agreed.
Thank you, Demi. I was literally going to go on to the client side of things. So you've kind of hit the nail on the head there. I was going to ask about challenging clients, because I've had a fair few challenging clients. And sometimes it can be difficult, especially the higher you climb in the ranks, so to speak, to manage their expectations. And I think you've done a good job there with setting the boundaries. There are some times where client expectations are not managed well right off the back from scoping. So perhaps whoever sold the project, or the team that sold the project, perhaps didn't accurately scope out something that was feasible. And the team that are actually delivering the project end up carrying that burden. But where you have potentially had perhaps a challenging client, maybe personality wise, or their expectations were very high, what did you do if you've had that situation? Chibi, Mavis, Demi.
Well, I will talk about where I had a challenging and difficult situation with a client. They weren't necessarily challenging, but the situation was challenging. So the situation was the client had asked us to come in to do a piece of work with their team to understand what could improve and make them high performing. And typically, when we are going to do some kind of team development piece, we usually want to understand what's going on in the team, do a bit of a discovery diagnosis of the team. What that often involves is some kind of survey, and some kind of focus group where you kind of talk to people, do one-to-one interviews or talk to them in a group. During that process, it emerged that the client who had actually hired us was actually the issue. And so therefore, I was in a challenging position as to the fact that this was a client that was paying for our work, but then I needed to also communicate some difficult messages, really. And so the way that I did that was really about expressing empathy. I expressed empathy to her because it was about understanding the role of leadership, the nature of leadership, understanding her. It's not easy, but then using that as an opportunity to bring self-awareness and insight. And this is where my psychotherapy training becomes invaluable, because ultimately, I think when we're dealing with clients, we're dealing with people. They're people like us. They're trying to survive in their job sometimes. They're trying to do their best. And so I think there is something about empathy that's very important, so that you can be in each other's shoes, but then using that as an opportunity to share insights about what is required going forward, so it doesn't feel humiliating. I think that's the piece. It's not making people feel humiliated, but helping them to see the truth so that they can actually make changes that's going to be beneficial for everyone as well as them. So it was about empathy and then delivering the message, and it went well.
Amazing. Key takeaways there: empathy, and clients are people. They are people. And most of the time I found that the clients that you're speaking to on these calls as consultants, they're reporting into someone. So it's usually inherited expectations from a boss or a CEO somewhere. And they're paying a lot of money. So sometimes their expectations are valid. Maybe they just don't deliver them in the nicest way all the time. But it's not all doom and gloom. Consulting is amazing. And because of time, I do want to move on to how to get started. So there might be people on this call who are not in life sciences consulting, they're not in consulting, and they just don't know where to start. So Chibi, Demi, this is a time to name drop some companies. If I'm getting into life sciences consulting, what companies should be on my radar?
Yeah, definitely. I can go first on that one. So just to kind of give a little bit more context how I got into life sciences consulting. So After I finished my undergrad degree, I originally went to go work for actually the same company that Chibi worked for previously, Real Chemistry. So they did more around kind of marketing, PR, comms, digital like analytics, that type of consulting. And so that's how I kind of got my first experience into, you know, the client services and the environment and the expectations. And so then off the back of doing my master's, that's where a lot of the people that had like, or alumni from my course had gone into life sciences consulting. And so what they would regularly do is they'd reach out to the course administrator, essentially asking for interns to come and support in the, you know, the companies and the life sciences consulting practices. And so that's how I originally got into the company that I then started working for, which was called Navigant at the time. And then I guess the rest is history. And one of the things that really kind of I felt was quite important for myself, and you know, as I started to do more research into the industry area and how I wanted to shape and define my career, was recognizing that there's a lot of consulting firms where if you already know your kind of direct interest and passion is, you know, life sciences or healthcare consulting, you can directly, you know, work in teams where that is the industry focus area. So when I was originally, you know, exploring consulting when I was in undergrad and university, I was looking more at some of the, you know, the bigger, well-known like generalist consulting companies like your McKinseys, your Bains, your BCGs, where when you kind of join as a junior consultant, you typically are a generalist and you don't really specialize in a specific industry area. And it's as you become more senior and more experienced that you then, you know, might make a decision to focus on a specific industry area. And for me, I knew entering into the career that I wanted to specialize from the jump. And so, you know, there's a lot of companies where they are specialist life sciences consulting firms, or they have teams that have a specialist life sciences practice, and where you can really kind of just get that experience and get the, you know, and be able to kind of specialize immediately. Chibi's already mentioned one that she worked at, like ZS, for example. You've got IQVIA as well. You've got like quite a few different consulting firms that you can really just kind of get straight in and stuck in. And I would recommend internships as well. I think they're a good opportunity to kind of get your foot into the door and really get that experience to recognize if it's something that you feel you would enjoy and can see yourself doing as a career long term.
I completely agree with that. I think the other thing that I would add is, so pathways definitely do differ. So there is the joining straight into consulting firms, especially the ones that a lot of people know. So the Accentures, the BCGs, the McKinseys, those kind of like those big organizations, EY, those big organizations. A lot of them have very good entry routes, analyst associates, that kind of entry route, and then moving up. One of the ways that I did, and I think there's some people on the call here who might be like career switchers. So one of the things that I did, particularly already being in life sciences and working in pharma, and this is like when I was at GSK, is you can get on projects internally where you work with consulting firms. And that was a really, really good way for me to understand what's out there. I did this both when I was at Takeda very early in my career, when I kind of got like access to like client services by working on projects where you would work with a external firm or professional services firm. And then I did this again at GSK when I was working on like a couple of really big innovative projects, and you would bring in consulting firms to help you deliver them. That gave me so much exposure to the world of consulting and how they work, and being that person on a project with them, understanding what they do, asking them a lot of questions about like what's the day in the life of your job, and thinking this is really cool. This is something I'd really like to do. And that is actually how I ended up working eventually at ZS Associates, because I was a ZS client. And although I didn't immediately go there, I had a job in between. But like I built a relationship with that organization once we selected them for a job, and then beyond that, it led to a future position working at ZS. So that's a really, really good way of being able to kind of like see what the world of consulting is like, and perhaps even build a relationship that allows you to pivot into that, because oftentimes they're looking for experts, or they're looking for domain expertise. If we go back to what I said earlier about some people being more generalists, at least in life sciences consulting, they really value when you bring in some sort of domain expertise from living and experiencing the job firsthand.
Yeah, totally agree. Some more name drop companies I can think of, Norstella, they're an umbrella company. They encapsulate Sightline, Evaluate, Panalgo, Dedham Group, MMIT, all life science consulting firms. There's Trinity Life Sciences, I believe they're called. There's KX Advisors. These are all like life science specialist companies. But
LEK is another one.
Sorry, what was that one?
LEK?
LEK, yeah, that's another one. LEK. Some more competitive than others in terms of like their culture as well. But yeah, these are all companies that should definitely be on your radar. But don't disregard the companies that don't advertise themselves as life science first. So Baringa's actually one. Well, does it count? Well, companies that span industries. So for instance, the company I currently work at, Faculty, we span multiple industries, and life sciences is just a sector within that. But I essentially do what you all do with AI.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I should explain a bit more about Baringa actually as a structure. So yeah, so Baringa as an organization is I'd say it's a mid-size consulting firm, UK headquartered, and we're a matrix organization as well. So we have teams that are industry focused, so such as the team that I sit in, pharma and life sciences, but we also have like energy, tech, media, telco, consumer products. And then we have capability teams as well. So the capability teams span across industry areas. So say, for example, we'll have like people and organizational change, process excellence, the customer design, experience and innovation. And so those capability teams will then span across industry areas. So we will have projects with clients, for example, where if it's like a life science client, it might be an individual that's from the life sciences team that will work on the project alongside maybe somebody that's from the capabilities that brings that specific technical expertise to work alongside us that brings the industry expertise.
Thank you. Thanks for explaining that, Demi. Mavis, just one last question before we open up the floor for questions. For someone that's listening that's perhaps a graduate early in their career or is a career switcher with no prior experience in consulting, what transferable skills or even hard skills would you recommend they really leverage to get into life sciences consulting?
Wow, there are so many skills. I think the first thing to say is whatever people have can be leveraged. Whatever you already have can be leveraged. So my story is that, as I mentioned to you, I'm not a career consultant, and I managed to get my role in EY through networking. So that's the first thing. And it has actually been all the skills and experience rather than the knowledge that helped me in consulting because I literally had to learn on the job. So I didn't do a course. I wasn't part of an internship where they take you through and teach you how to be a consultant. I had to learn on the job. So I think there are a couple of key skills that you really need because I think everyone on this call, we're dealing with highly capable, highly intelligent people. So that's a given. So the ability to learn the technical component is already there. It's really about the skills that you need to support and augment that and make you successful. And for me, it's about resilience and adaptability. So you need to be willing to try new things, give things a go, be willing to make mistakes, as I keep saying, because I think life is not linear. We try things, they don't always work out. So we need to be open to that, but understand they're all opportunities to grow. So have that growth mindset. I think we also have to be somebody who's very relational. What does that mean? Doesn't mean you have to be an extrovert, but it has to mean you are interested in people and getting to know people and build relationships. Because one of the ways you build your career in these very big organizations, even mid-size, there's a lot of people, is really about building relationships. So you need to be comfortable speaking to people, getting to know people and be curious. So big skill is about being curious, curious to learn, curious to understand, curious to grow. So I think those are really key capabilities. And I guess the final thing I would say, really from my perspective, that's helped me is being really clear about why I'm there. I think anything in life, when you're trying things, you've got to be really clear about why you're doing it. You have to have a sense of purpose and meaning. Because sometimes you can have a goal, but if it's not meaningful, this is where we see a lot of burnout. This is where we see people find it really difficult to keep going. So I think you need to know really why it's important you're doing it, why you're doing it, and really what you're trying to get out of it as well. So that's a few things I'll say.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mavis. I think we'll end it there with the questions, and we can now, well, with the discussion, sorry, and we'll open up the floor to questions. I can see one question in the chat for yourself, Chibi. How was the transition from pharma into consulting?
That's a really good question. So it was definitely a shift. Even though the types of roles I've always had in pharma are kind of serving internal clients, but moving from being inside pharma when you maybe focus on depth of something in execution into consulting where you need to be a little bit more structured, broad, and fast-paced, it was definitely a shift. And I came in at a more senior level in consulting. So I had the actual challenge of, despite my experience in industry, the formal consulting training you'd usually get early in career, if you'd started as a career consultant, was a gap for me, if I'm completely honest. So one of the biggest challenges was learning how to identify and lean on the right team to deliver projects successfully. Luckily, where I went into, or the company I went into, they actually had like a different way of managing people that come in with domain expertise. So they train you slightly differently, and they offered me a lot of like support. So one of the first things, as I mentioned, was always having a really, really strong team that I could lean on, who were like career consultants. They've been trained since they left uni, and so they really, really knew how to execute well on projects. So having that, but then also bringing in my domain expertise in the clinical space gave me that credibility with clients straight away. So when clients saw the blend of she knows what she's talking about and she's got a really strong team, over time, combining the expertise with the consulting toolkit that I was gradually building, allowed me to be, a really strong consultant. Problem solving, storytelling, and client engagement became a really powerful mix for me.
Thank you, Chibi. And as someone that also came from pharma into consulting, they love it. Consulting companies love to see their clients on your CV. So I
Yes.
started out at Pfizer, and that's all they spoke to me about in my interview. What is it like at Pfizer? Because you can speak the language of the client. So they love that. Okay, let's go on to some more questions. And also, you can now come off mute and ask questions. So raise your hand if you would like to come off mute to ask questions. But we'll follow the ones in the chat. So someone asked, hi, thank you all for the time today. A few months ago, I saw some discourse, about the lack of job security in consultancy. How would you say the job security is in this field? Demi, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, sure. And I've had this question before actually. So personally for me, I'm not really too concerned about the kind of job security in consulting. A lot of the kind of the area that people are really kind of nervous about is AI. And the question I get all the time is, with the advancements of AI, ChatGPT, Copilot, like what's the value of consultants? Do we really need all of these consultants to do this work? Well, I think a lot of clients really appreciate the human touch and the human element. And I think that's just something that, AI is never going to be able to do. Have a lot of, conversations with clients where it's almost like they like us to be there by their side. They like us to, hold their hand, really kind of be that soundboard, be that kind of voice next to them, guiding them along their journey and helping them with the solving of their problems. So I think that from a job security perspective, I'm not concerned. I think that, really AI, digital solutions, digital tools are going to be there to help us to be more efficient at what we do and improve our ways of working. I don't think it's going to, to kind of take away our jobs. And I think as long as there's, companies are always going to have challenges, and there's always going to be a consultant there that is going to provide them or propose to provide them with a solution to help to solve it.
I think that's just right.
I don't want to spend too much time on the question, but I would go as far as to say that in the world of AI digital tools, there's a greater need for consultants than ever before. And it's not even just in consulting. So in my current role, it's an AI company, but my team is really building out a team of consultants because there is a preference for them in how we understand how to solve the biggest challenges. And you can't just throw AI and digital tools at anybody. They need people who can explain to them, what does this mean for your world? What does this mean in your ecosystem? What does this mean in your job? And I actually firmly believe that there's always work for consultants, whether it's in consulting or anywhere else. We bring a completely unique set of skills that companies are always like intrigued at how we think, how we lead, how we can solve challenges. So I actually think the discipline of consulting is one that actually helps get any job, essentially, that you'd ever really want to do.
Totally
that would
agree. I work at the intersection of AI and life science consulting. Just look for a job that requires the AI. They love it. Like there's a need for it. And the beauty of life science consulting and healthcare is that AI will never really get to the point where it's the one delivering a diagnosis to a patient. As you mentioned, Demi, there's a need for a human in the loop there. We are not advised at my current role to ever consult or advise a client to implement a AI first solution to patients, because there's a high reputational risk of an AI agent or an AI system hallucinating, as we like to call it, and telling a patient that it has a diagnosis that it doesn't. So yeah, there's still a way to go. Let's keep it snappy with the questions and the answers just because of the timing. Someone said, do you recommend a further degree to pivot into life science consulting? A lot of the roles require masters or PhD. Mavis, do you have anything to say here?
I can only talk from a people consulting perspective, and I don't think you do from an experienced hire perspective. As I said, I think what you're bringing is your existing experience and credentials in the space, and then coupled with a willingness to learn. Those are really the things that you need to be bringing into role from my perspective. However, if you're wanting to specialize in particular areas of people consulting, so people consulting is really around how do we help organizations, their leaders and their people work better together in order to achieve their business outcomes? That can be through how they're structured, it can be through the employee experience, it can be through their culture. So what some people want to do is go and do some kind of psychology qualification or something that gives them the capability to do things like leadership assessments, but it's not necessarily something you need all the time. So I would say that actually you can come with the qualifications you have, but it depends on how comfortable you are learning on the job.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the answer to that is no. I know so many people that don't have a master's or PhD. One thing I will say that does benefit a lot of people is prior experience. So placements or internships, they always look great. Someone asked about whether or not getting an MBA, so a similar line of questioning here, is absolutely necessary for life science consulting as someone already working in pharma. I think again the answer here is no, but Chibi, I think, do you want to add to
Yeah,
that?
the answer is no. But what it might do is you might be able to come in at a higher level. So at the firm that I worked at most recently, you couldn't come in at like a consultant level. So that was like the third level up. If you hadn't ever done kind of consulting before or even had like relevant experience before, you'd always have to start maybe at an associate consultant level, which was the second level up. So what the MBA piece did was that if people went and did an MBA and came, they knew that they could at least apply for a job at consultant and above, because it brings you a set of skills that you would learn in MBA that's kind of relevant for that type of role. So you don't need it. It might just impact where you can start.
Amazing.
Yeah, I was just going to add as well, having done my master's, I personally did feel that did help me get into consulting, but I think the benefit was less so of what I learned on the course and more so of the network that I was introduced to and the doors that it then opened for me. So I think, something like an MBA, it's really kind of the network that is the most value on a course like that.
Thank you, Demi. Alicia asked, do you have any recommendations for gaining relevant work experience during the early years of a longer degree, such as medicine? I've noticed that many firms tend to focus their formal programs on penultimate and final year students.
Do you know what was coming up for me on that? I was thinking about when I was working in the NHS, and to your point, Chibi, earlier, it's how do you find opportunities to get involved with projects where you currently are? So rather than always wait to necessarily go through the consulting route, how can you get involved with projects where you're on placement and proactively seek those opportunities rather than waiting to get necessarily onto a program? To Demi's point being, it's just about getting the experience. That's really critical to help as well.
Thank you.
And then I'll be honest on this one. So actually the year before we had a summer intern in our life sciences team that was in the middle of his medical degree. So he did the internship just off the back of completing his integrated degree. And we didn't offer him a role after the internship. purely because of the fact that we were looking to hire people that could start at least within the year, so up finishing their degree. So I would say it is a little bit of a challenge sometimes when you are trying to do the internship, just because a lot of companies will look for interns to then hopefully offer them a role afterwards. But I don't think it's a limiter to being able to get that experience, but just something to just take into consideration.
Great, thank you. I'll just take the last question that came in, the progression route for consulting roles. What requirements for each position as you become more senior? I have found, sorry, that consulting tends to be quite hierarchical, to be totally honest. You tend to come in as an associate or junior consultant and make your way up the ranks. The easiest way to make strides in consulting is actually to change jobs, I found. I'm not gonna lie. But it tends to be with experience. So you will move up to more senior roles with experience. It can be with qualifications, but I wouldn't say that that's a be all or end all as well. So yeah, I think that answers that question. Jennifer, would you mind just resharing the slides? And if anyone has any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And then when I speak about our community, we can answer those questions there in our They Don't Teach This Club. Thank you. So just closing out now, thank you all so much for your questions, for joining. Thank you to our speakers. Jennifer, next slide, please. So as I've been speaking about earlier, we have a community, a Wenite community on WhatsApp called the They Don't Teach This Club. And this is where we would essentially answer all your amazing questions on topics such as this and any other questions that you have about pharma and life sciences. If you have your phone to hand and you can scan the QR code, then please do so. If not, you can visit our website at wenite.co.uk, scroll down on the landing page and you will see this form where you can input your details and I will admit you into the group. Next slide, please. As a perk for you all joining this call today, we have a professional academy that is starting on the 29th of September. This is a paid academy and it's where you get some real bespoke one-to-one coaching, industry masterclasses, cohort support before, during and after the academy, and practical tools and insider knowledge. This is for professionals that have experience. So Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not too sure about the years of experience needed, but it's for essentially people that are quite established in their careers. We have one for graduates that is earlier in the year. We had concluded it back in March, so we'll have another one running next year. But for everyone that has joined this call, you have, and if you join our community, our They Don't Teach This Club, you have the opportunity to access one of our industry masterclasses free of charge. So this is where we get experts in the field, such as the wonderful ladies that have spoken today, that will speak to you on very specialized topics within the industry. Jennifer, next slide, please. The way that you can tap into this offer is simply by joining the They Don't Teach This Club today or in subsequent days after this. So the sooner you join, the quicker you can access this benefit, so to speak. And based on the demand, we can then kind of group people into masterclasses or industry masterclasses of interest. So join our They Don't Teach This Club. As well as that, we also post job ads. We post industry news, we post events as well. So if you want to know what's happening within the Wenite community first, that's where you want to be. Or follow us on LinkedIn. I don't know if there's another slide after this. Next slide, please, Jennifer. No, there isn't. Thank you all so much for joining. I know we are 2 minutes over time, but if you stayed for the last 2 minutes, you would have got the exclusive offer. So is there anyone? Yes, I can post a link in the chat. Well, actually, I'll send the link to the attendees via email because I have to get the link in an inaccessible way at the moment. Thank you all so much for joining on a Thursday evening. We hope this was useful. The recording will be made available online. Thank you all, and thank you to our speakers, and thank you, Jennifer. Bye, everyone.